Good morning and welcome back to this second and last day of the conference. At 9 o'clock, I think 5 people had turned up, so I thought either you all adapted to Faroese time, which is always 10 minutes late, or you had a party last night. So I certainly hope you enjoyed your dinner last night. And today, maybe it's a good thing that today is not a long working day. In the afternoon, you have pleasure and excursions on the program. First on the program this morning is Bente Bratland Holm, who has a great experience from the Norwegian travel industry. She has established and led organizations connected to the meeting industry as well as travel and tourism. She has been managing director of Visit Oslo and is now director of Visit Norway. And she is now going to present to us Norway's new National Tourism Strategy 2030. There you go. You're so well, Bente.
Thank you.
By the year 2030, Norway has become a sustainable travel destination. International guests arrive through green corridors, and we're called the seamless country because traveling is so easy here. New job opportunities have brought new life to communities of all sizes. Visitors come to experience our nature, culture, and way of life. A good place to live is a good place to visit. We've created this success story together. The result is an exciting adventure for the Norwegian tourism industry and for our visitors. At least that's the plan, as long as the strategy that will take us there doesn't end up in a draw. To be sure, we've secured ourselves against just that. Not for the draw.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for allowing me to be here and to talk a little bit about our national strategy. And I'm going to do this with 2 focus areas. One is to talk a little bit about the main steps in the strategy and also how we did it, how did we proceed. Norway is a big country and we have a lot of stakeholders. I have never done this presentation in English before, so bear over with me. I'm going to do my best. First, a little bit about Innovation Norway. Visit Norway is part of Innovation Norway, and we are governmentally owned, and Innovation Norway work on different fields and includes the Norwegian NTO Visit Norway. But we work also with our own mission letter from the government with earmarked money. So we operate within Innovation Norway. And Norway is a long country. And when you're going to make a strategy for such a huge country, actually we were talking about it at dinner yesterday. If you take the coastline and stretch it out, it will go 2.5 times around the Earth. So that says a little bit about how many fjords, how many mountains on the inside. So it's a big country and it's a lot of stakeholders. So where were we in 2019, which we all refer to very, very often? This is the numbers that the politicians who gave us the mission to do this. This is the way we are talking about the industry. It's in GDP, number of jobs, and exports, which is important when you're going to talk to politicians to make them understand, because this is the language they understand. Norway has been marketing themselves for 100 years when it comes to nature. So this is, we have been monitoring the interest of Norway as a vacation destination among those people who have never been there before. And this is the same result we have had for many, many years, because we have been selling nature and nature alone for 100 years, and then we have been doing that very, very well. So if it's one picture that you have of Norway, it's beautiful and it's nature. But we have failed when it comes to food, the people who lives there, the social life, the friendliness, the history and the culture. We haven't talked so much about that. And this is a little bit of the background. Because when we saw, as many other, we saw the last 6 years before the pandemic hit us, we saw a growth in tourism. But we saw a growth in nature-based tourism. And we saw the same growth at the same time, at the same places every year. And then we started to talk about over-tourism, because we attracted more and more and more guests to areas where what the Signe was talking about yesterday, we didn't own the land there. We were not rigged to take up all these guests, and we had no plan for it, and there were no management of it. So the last year before, in 2019, there was a lot of writing in the media about over-tourism. We could see especially in the rural places, people were showing up in the garden in small houses, looking into the windows, too many cruises, and so on. So the debate were on that side instead of the positive side. So, the mission then, what we got, was from our politician. And they said this was the mission. We need a roadmap for an economical, resilient travel industry by 2030. A plan that would generate all year-round jobs and outlast the government without compromising on sustainability. That was the tasks we were given. But what I thought was also brave of our politician at the time, because tourism is not that important for Norway, that was that they say to us, we need a professional plan. And we need you to facilitate it among the Norwegian stakeholders. And that is not so often that they do that, because normally when they write the plan, they write it in the political colors of the present government. So it's not so. Then we just steer after that. So now it was a bottom-up twist to it. So what did we do then, and how did we do it? Involvement was key, and not involvement only to all the stakeholders within the industry, but all the others. Because when we got this mission, that was the first week of January in 2020, and then when everything closed down, then the 12th of March, we have to redesign the whole process, and everything went digitally. All the meetings. And that meant that we could reach so many more. So we had panel discussions, we had one-to-one discussions, roundtable discussions, with all kind of mix of people together. We were talking to environmental organizations, we were talking to mayors, we were talking to our owners, to other departments or ministries, and altogether, we got 400 written and other insights that gave us the overview of what people thought how we should proceed, and what's the outcome from their side if we should grow in tourism, and how could we use tourism as a positive motor in the small societies and local environment. When we got all this information, we said, okay, what do we do with this? Okay, we have to sort it out, but what was impressive in this process is that we saw that they didn't talk about where does the tourists come from? Are there too many? They were total different things that came into the agenda. And we found out that it's important for us now, since we are digitally anyhow, to let the industry and others who are interested follow our steps as long as we go. Because what was the key that they came up with? That was framework condition, monitoring for better management. It was facilitation, including funding of public benefits. It was 8 different things that came up in all the discussion. Who was the similar? So we then saw that we need to talk about them. We need to talk with them. We need to talk with them regularly throughout the whole process, because what they have described is not the need for a marketing strategy. They really need something else, and we saw that when we took all these inputs that came in, we saw that we are talking about the ecosystem here. What they need, what they have said to us, was actually to describe an ecosystem. And what is the weakness and what is the strong thing about being an industry like the travel industry are in a place belonging to an ecosystem. So then we had to, the first we had to do is actually to start to talk to the industry about, should we do this as an industry strategy or as a holistic strategy with talking about us being a part of an important ecosystem. And then everybody said, yes, okay, then we can go. Then that was the first step we had to do. We had to be aware that we were on the same platform talking about what kind of strategy are we actually going to write. Because it's very different to take a total industrial looking only at the tourism sector, or as the tourism sector being a part of something bigger than just us. And then we said, okay, if we all agree that it is an ecosystem we are talking about, then we need goals that reflects that. Because even if the ministry are talking about growth, value creation, and jobs, if we are we could easily do only that. But when we're talking about an ecosystem, then we need to have the other who reflects that. And we have here 4 arrows going up and only 1 going down. And we do not, we cannot afford that the local communities get hurt, that this arrow goes down. Because then there's an unbalance in the ecosystem. So that was something we talked a lot about with the stakeholders as we went along. And when we all agree upon that, then we could start to quantify it, as you can see in the those of you who have read the material, the strategy. It is also out in English. The only thing who were supposed to go down is the climate footprint. We as an industry, we need to also have the same climate goal as our government has. So we cannot say that we cannot do the same as everyone else. So we said that we should reduce the climate footprint by 10% yearly. But then when we start to talk about climate, then we start to talk about feelings, about should we travel, should we not. And then we said, okay, then we need to speed up and make some tools that everyone can use so that we know what we are talking about on the same level. So we have developed in this process a tool for measuring the travel to a destination and within a destination, the carbon footprint. And so that everybody, and we have also made another calculator saying if you have so many people from this country, that will be the output. Now we are merging these two so that every destination around in the country can say what will be the mix of my customers, what must be the mix. If we are going to fly for a long time, then they have to stay longer. How long? So that we can build the products around facta and have a targeted goal. It can also be used at events. For instance, this event, we could have put it in and say, this is the carbon footprint for this event. Next year, we need to stay an extra day, and we need all to go out and spend so and so to have to know what we are talking about and to set measurable goals, and that we're talking about the same way of measure. So that is something we found out, that should we tell people that this is the way we are going to do it, we have to fly into Norway, up to northern Norway, to Svalbard. We have to fly to get somewhere, but then we must be careful and be careful on how we are building the thing around a destination, so that we can get the best guests. And the thirdly was, when this was established, we had to have 4 strategic pillars. And I have tried to put everything into one model here to show you that the deep drivers that we agreed upon in the beginning was the grid shift and the digitalization. We said, this is something that will affect us, and the sustainability will affect us no matter what we are deciding on a national level. This is something we had to take into consideration. Then we take the holistic approach about the local community, the guests, and the industry stakeholders. And then we put 4 strategic pillars around that. And that is one word that was very going through the whole process, and that was our capability. Our capability to make money the right way. Our capability to management, to reinforce it, to our capability to work together. And all these capabilities are the one we have built up the tasks around. We have a task doing, I'm going to show you, this is the way we are doing management, because we need to have better management, and we need to be able to change faster, to work better, to make this ecosystem function. And all along, and as we went along, we were filming, and we were talking a lot to the industry, because these 3 important pillars for us to agree that it is the ecosystem, to be aware that we need to have then goal reflecting the whole ecosystem, and that it rested on these pillars, and also good framework conditions, which means that we need to address to the authorities or to the government that there are some laws in the Book of Laws of Norway that need to be seen upon one more time, because it's not relevant for our time when we are going to work with this. So all the time throughout the whole process, we were filming, sending out to make sure that the industry didn't lose the grip that they had, that they were talking from different angles about how important this work was.
For DNT så det viktig at reiselivsnæringen utvikler seg på en natur- og klimavennlig måte. Skal vi få til det, så må vi satse på nærmarkedene, vi må få nattog til Europa, og vi må gjøre det lettere å velge klimavennlig når man reiser rundt i Norge. Og så må reiselivsnæringen ta vare på de unike fortrinnene den har. Urørt natur og stillhet, allemannsretten, det er fantastisk ved Norge, og reiselivsnæringen og myndighetene må sørge for at vi kan bevare det for fremtidige generasjoner. Og så mener vi at god besøksforvaltning er viktig. Ordningen med nasjonale turiststier har vist at vi kan ta vare på de ikoniske turmålene våre hvis vi tilrettelegger de på en god måte. Alt dette håper vi reiselivsstrategien kan være med å få til.
So throughout the whole period, different stakeholders, also people working with recruitment, people who were studying to become a part of this industry, were talking about their expectations if we now are going to have a national strategy. So here are the whole strategy. It's very on one page. We had a vision that it's going to be a big impact with small footprints, and that has been our guiding star throughout the whole period. So and throughout the whole work, we attach. If we see the primary strategies to reinforce value creation capacity, reinforce management, as I mentioned, secure adapted measures and good framework conditions, all of them has attached some action points to them. And we have suggested here 23 action points, and they're all connected to one of the strategic pillars, and also pointing to what kind of sustainable goals they are asking, they are referring to. But just to give you a short example on what we mean by a professional strategy. These action points here are not pointing towards the industry itself. One of the points is here that we need a better coordination for tourism policy on a national level, which means that they need to start to talk among each other. There are 7 ministries that are giving directions on how to do the travel industry. They need to talk together. Let's start there. And then the communities, the municipalities, they need to talk together. So a lot of this doesn't cost money. It just costs the will to talk together on what do we want to frame for the future. Of course, there is a lot that also costs money. And what we have done here is to point out the different ministries. What do we as a destination are responsible for? What is the municipalities responsible? An action point connected to them. So if we took this and spread it out on the whole ecosystem, when you draw it up on a destination, there are different responsibility on different stakeholders. So how are we doing? We did this digitally. We launched it digitally. We have this, I think this is second time I'm in a room doing a presentation physically of this. But when it came out the first week of June, and it was very well received. And it was very well received and allowed us to talk about different topics than growth. Those who were normally up against each other, who are growth and over-tourism. So now the industry and the fabulous work of the stakeholders in the Norwegian travel industry, which were taking so much time. Nobody had work at that time when we made this. No, they were out of work. Everything was closed down. And even though there was a tremendous interest to look up and ahead and said, okay, what have we learned and how do we want it when we open up again? So it was already there. Everybody had taken it into consideration. Everybody did local things when it was launched digitally in June. And there are a local strategy in the making. There are so many who already have made a local strategy based on the same principles and based on their own input to what we should do on a national level. And as I showed you earlier, the big book, it is actually a big book. We made a huge book of the strategy. And we have a Norwegian saying, for viktig for skuffen, because normally strategies are put in a drawer and it's there and forgotten and so on. So how to keep it alive, we decided to send this huge book out on a tour around Norway. So it has been touring all around Norway, sending with the post, so that every destination who got it could put a local focus with and use that one, and that everybody could sign it. We have seen it, made politicians, mayors to sign it, to read it, to have a local debate around what does this mean for us. Let's see, it was in Svalbard 2 weeks ago. It has still not got back to Oslo. I don't know where it is yet. So I don't know where it is actually now. I think someone now, since we have moved to a new government, somebody had asked to get it one more time because we need it. Because what has happened between June and now, of course, the book of Norway have been touring around, but also we have got a new government last week. And the new government, then we got it tested. What will happen now? Will they feel that they have got something handed over from the old government? No, I don't think so. Because it's based on professional advice. So if they should go out now and say, oh no, we don't want it from the old government, we want our new, they will have exactly the same. So what they have decided is actually to build a plan, an action plan on top of that. So they came with their declaration 6 days ago, and they said that they pointed at 7 very important parts of the strategy, that it's their mission now to fulfill it. And then we will see, they will fulfill it during the period to come, which is 4 years. And I really, really hope that they will stick to that, and we will start that work already next week. Thank you. I think that was it.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. Very interesting. I think those of you who are writing on politics and work to be done did learn a lot. Do you have questions for Bente or comments? No? The mics? Yes, here. Anna? Jan Palle? Yeah.
Good morning, and thank you so much. You've made my week. I loved the way that you sort of really embraced the idea of an ecosystem. I just, and the other word that really stuck out for me, because I think is vital, is this notion of capability. If we can raise the capability of all the elements in that system, it will thrive, it will flourish. The question I have, though, is the focus was still on tourism. Obviously, you've changed the goals, which I also think is fantastic. But to what extent were you asked, or did you look at the contribution that tourism can make to the overall well-being of Norway, to the other sectors of Norway, or the other elements of Norway?
I'm going to show you. I didn't talk so much about it, but it's important. We have worked quite a lot with the ripple effects. And also, we have, when we have quantified it, we said that in communities and areas where we are doing tourism is going to see the effects on not more shopping, but better life, better quality of life. We have also indicators already so that we can put it into a system and start measuring it. Yeah, that was very important for us. To see what is a ripple effect for whom.
Yes?
You have very ambitious plans. It's a great inspiration. I was just wondering, how about your funding? Are they following these ambitions plans so you can implement them?
I wish. No,
Sorry.
The thing is that the way it works in Norway, as long as it's a good thing about be asked to give a professional strategy, because if it's political, it's easier to say we have taken it in and it's our government who are going to decide and we will fund this. That is not the case here. We have handed it into the government for a professional advice. There is nothing who says, okay, it's gone through, now we are going to do that. We just keep convincing them that this is the way of doing, and you have asked for a professional advice, now you have got one, so now you have to follow that, and you have to show us the money. They have started, though, with a few of them, and that is what I'm so happy for the platform who came 7 days ago, because there they told that they should fulfill the most heavy one when it comes to implementing, especially a couple of them, which we know other sectors have had. We have suggested a program called Agenda 21, which researchers and a lot of people know about. That has never been done in the service sector before, because when you do this program and when you have EU programs, you see that it's easier for selling things out on the export market. When you work in the service industry, you're not up there competing against this about this money. So we need to have the system shift, and that is a big thing. And they have said they are going to look into it, and they have said that they will go through with to try to fulfill that action point, which is actually probably the most important for us.
Yes. What do you think is the main reason that it was so well received?
The involvement, and the fact that it was COVID, and not because of the COVID, but because of that we did it digitally. Because then everybody was a part of it, and we could take okay, if we should do that prior to when everything closed down, we wouldn't have the time to meet. So that was it's the good thing about being home and everything was closed. They were really fighting and showing what kind of industry do we want when we come back. And some groups were reading what does OECD, UNWTO, and all of them are saying, so we can take all the international advices into consideration. But that, I think it was well received because they were involved. And a lot of some of the destinations who are here today, they had already launched their local strategy based on this before it even came out. So it's that's a very good thing.
So involvement all the way around.
Yeah.
Yes.
I have one question. It sounds like this was very, it was consensus all the way around, the way you present it.
Yeah.
We all know that there are some internal conflicts in tourism, and maybe especially if you look at climate footprint, airlines, etc. Where did you have to do the compromises, or where were the conflicts? Could you tell us something about that?
I don't think I was expecting more conflicts, especially from the big airline companies, transportations, but they all agreed. They don't have to follow this. But if we are going to do this, that is where the official money goes. And normally they walk a little bit after the official money. But I was really surprised because 2 of the workshops, we had all the airlines together. And that is a good thing, because you cannot then be the airline who raised the hand and say, no, we are not into these goals. Everybody followed. And especially when they came to the hospitality industry, all the big hotel chains, international hotel chains, they did again. We need to do that now, and we need to work together. there was not a huge, the biggest argument was actually about how to prevent the areas for building out new cottages, how much of the nature shall we take to build out for the activities and so on. So what we had to do was that we involved also, we are not allowed to work politically doing a thing like this, but we can work to talk to the other ministries, those are working embetsverket. So we talked to them so that when they were making their strategies, we had similar tasks. So I think the biggest discussion will come now when we are going to put it into action, I think. And we can see now when things are opening again that everybody is urging for guests so that they can survive and get back. So now I guess the discussion will come. But that's why it's so important for us to work out some tools. I don't say that we are going to ban cruise. But I can give them a tool that shows what are the income and what are the costs we have to pay in a destination in all kinds of ways, but just by showing, so they can do it themselves. So that is the main thing.
So the cruise lines are included in the whole picture,
yeah.
Even though they're foreign companies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. We had the two big conferences only on cruise, with the cruise lines and with the port authorities.
So that urging for guests may also have helped for the cooperation and goodwill from everybody.
Yeah, but it won't be a walk in the park, because now we are going to execute it. So now the discussion is coming. It's easy to do it on paper when there are no guests, and this is what the future we want. But when the guests are coming or not coming, the borders are opening again, and we are going to execute it. Now we need to be wise.
Yeah. There you go.
Yeah, very inspiring. I was thinking, I saw a headline that said about 43 new jobs all around. Yeah, can you maybe, is it because you expect more tourists, or is there a new area of job?
Yeah, more job into the industry. Yeah, that is something we have discussed with the airline companies. This is actually a growth plan also, because we haven't used the capacity that we already have, because it's peak season. We have built for peak season, and so that we have so much. We only have 50% all over Norway capacity, so we need to use the capacity, and then we will have more people coming in working within the industry just by doing that. Fill up the capacity that we have. Then that means that we need to have other seasons, talk to other segments, and we have had a very strong commitment to what we are how are we going to restart again. We have to restart in 3 areas. We need to focus on the closer market, which everyone else does, but we need to tell the world that we have more than a beautiful nature. We have actually food and quite friendly people. So we need to do that, and we need to work on recruitment, because that is a major threat now. Everybody has left the industry. We cannot get hold of chefs or anyone. And the third one is to continue what we started during the pandemic, paid by the government, to certify within environmental certification of the industry. Yeah, I think I've spent my time now.
Yes, thank you. Anyone? No, so that's all clear.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bente, and congratulations and good luck on their implementing. We are now going to have presentations from the workshops yesterday, 3 of them, and I believe, Lillian, you were the first. There you go. The floor is yours. Lillian Veie, and that will be
Practices.
best practices.
Yes.
There you go. Can I just remind you guys, before you leave, will you please leave these just out here on the table. And if you're going on excursions, you can bring them and just leave them at the hotel when you leave later today. There you go, Lilian.
Great, thank you. Yes, as Elin said, my name is Lilian Valle. I'm the director of Visit Tórshavn, and I was so lucky to get to present for you the things that we were talking about on the workshop, best practices, yesterday. And the guys who weren't on that workshop, you really missed out, because we went on a fabulous journey. We visited beautiful hotels in Denmark. We went whale watching in Iceland, and we also went kayaking in Lofoten. And we visited some beautiful cottages in the Finnish woods. And of course, best practices, they told us about how they manage their business in their local places. And there are some things they do have in common, these 4 businesses. They all give something back to community. And they do this by collaborating with others, having partnerships, and they also do it through community involvement, and I think that's really important to remember. So citizens in the area, they get involved in the business. And I can maybe give some few examples. First one up was Claus Nielsen from Signature Hotels in Denmark. And this is actually it's a first mover in hotel chains. They got their Green Key label in 1995, first hotel in Denmark. But they didn't have such great numbers. They had a rusty image, they had red numbers, and they weren't well known. So they were thinking, how the hell do we manage this and make this into a better business? And luckily for us and for everybody, they stuck to their values. They said, well, we're going to keep thinking sustainability into our strategies, and what will be the leading star, as Norway was talking about. And it was like, how would nature build a hotel or run a hotel? So that was the thing they were focusing on, doing their new strategy. And with that in mind, they have managed to become a more well-known hotel chain, of course. They also have black numbers now, and they have a really great image. We also went to Iceland, as I told you, visited North Sailing with Heimir Harðarson. I'm not that good at Icelandic. He is also, or their family-run business is also a first mover. They have been preserving old wooden ships, Icelandic wooden vessels. And this was back in '95, I believe. And at that point, there weren't any wooden ships that were preserved in Iceland. So they did this, of course, bringing back the old tradition and all these kinds of things. What they also have been focusing on from the beginning is the sustainability part, reusing, recycling, and so on. But of course, Iceland has been, what can you say? They have experienced over-tourism up to the pandemic in 2019, and they started rethinking their strategy. So they started thinking about collaborate locally, expand locally, and educate locally. And one of the things they started focusing on now post the pandemic or after COVID hit is science and voluntourism. They now use their vessels in something they call ocean missions, which is they use their vessels and people come to take some excursions with the vessels, but they also are included in science projects. So they fish and look at microplastic in the fish and study and bring something back to science in that way. And one of the things that Heimir said, which I think is a really good point, is that the point is to keep going, not growing. As I told you, we also went kayaking in Lofoten with Jan Engstad. And the way they give something back to community is by not leaving a trail. Of course, it's difficult to leave a trail when you're kayaking. See, it's a bigger problem when you're traveling on the mountains. But still, they have to, you know, go on land sometimes. And they also pick up plastic along the coastlines in Lofoten. And there is plenty of it. They have been collecting tons and tons of plastic. So that is how they also give something back to the community. And what I think was interesting there is, of course, everybody can pick up plastic wherever they go, but they register all the plastic that they pick up and they put it into an app. So you can visit a web page or this app, I believe it was, and see, oh, how much plastic have they been picking up on these places in Norway. Finland, all woods and lakes. But we went visiting the Hawkill Cottage Resort with Anno Huotari. And this is a really small cottage resort. I believe they have 8 cottages, all made out of wood from the local forest. So they, of course, use local products. They also collaborate with locals. They involve the community there. And one focus they have is that they always put quality over quantity. And I also think that is really an interesting goal to have. And then when they were thinking how do we run our business, they say that sustainable business is not a choice, it's actually a necessity. So that's like their goal. I would like to just end up with something Heimer said, and that is we always talk about growth in numbers, in vessels, in his case, income, and so on and so forth. But what he said is that we should focus on growth in happiness, growth in employee satisfaction, and so on. And I think that's a really nice thing to have in mind when moving forward. And of course, you weren't all on this beautiful journey with us. So you should go to the Nora website. You can find out find the web pages and go visit them, and maybe also go in person sometime. So, best practices.
Thank you. Sounds like an interesting journey. Would you like to take, do you have questions or comments for these ideas? No? Okay, everything said. So the second will be seasonality. Here, just well.
Hi, good morning. My name is Anne-Leigh Lamhauge. I work at Visit Faroe Islands with meetings and events. And yesterday I went to the workshop called Seasonality, and I took some notes during that. And we had 2 presentations in that workshop. The first one was with Sarah Woodall from Innovations, Southern Greenland, but she is also the DMO for the region. And she gave a talk about locally anchored season expansion in South Greenland. And then we had a second presentation from Iceland. That was Sveinn Birkir Björnsson from Business Iceland, who was talking about how Iceland has changed their marketing campaigns to shift seasonality in Iceland. So Sarah was the one who started. And she was telling us about South Greenland as a tourism destination, and we saw amazing pictures also from South Greenland. They have these very mellow and beautiful landscapes in the south, and then they have more high mountains in the north that work really well with extreme and adventurous tourism. And they have hot springs, I didn't know that. And you can ski there in the wintertime. So it is a very versatile destination that really has a lot to offer. But what is with Southern Greenland is that they mainly have tourists in the summertime from May to September. And when Sarah was looking at the statistics and she was comparing it to the airline, the flights coming in, she found out that is roughly the same period when we have tourists. So they come from flights. They have 5,000 tourists that have overnight stays in southern Greenland, and the rest of them, they have actually 50,000, but the rest of them come from cruise ships. The challenge is, of course, to raise the winter season. And probably that will be a big challenge in the next few years, because they are expecting new flights, new airports. And that will take a little more time than expected, because they're hoping for a larger runway to get the bigger flights. So what they are dreaming about is when they get this new airport, that they will have 2 flights a week from Keflavik, so that they will get the different possibilities to offer all sorts of winter products. And they've actually already started this process. They have been traveling around southern Greenland to visit the operators that are in the different areas. And what they also found out when they did that is that most operators are open, or at least they can be open all year round, because they are there. They are from Greenland. Only a few of them are from abroad, and they pack their things in September and they come back in May. But most of them are already there. So they have started. They have taken tons of new pictures, winter pictures from southern Greenland, and they have actually done some really cool films that you should all go in and check out. And they are very much about adventurous tourism and extreme sports, and yeah, very, very cool stuff that they are doing. So yeah, I think the conclusion that I kind of had from Sarah's presentation was that this is really good, taking the pictures and being in the different areas. But what is maybe the best thing is the contact that you get with all the operators around your region while you're doing it. So the second presentation was from Svein Birkir, who is from Business Iceland. He has had the responsibility for many campaigns in Iceland these past 10 years at least. And as he said, no one travels to Iceland for the weather. So you could just as well market Iceland with winter photos. And that's actually what he has been doing for many, many years. They don't have any summer images in their marketing. The content is not from any summer activities. It's all winter activities, winter photos. They do not even use in their content when Reykjavik or Iceland is on some top 10 list of something. At least he said until now. Like he says, there's always a new crisis, a different crisis, and maybe you need to adjust some of the things that you're doing. But he has been responsible for instance, the Ask Gudmundur campaign. And his main job ever since he started has been to increase awareness for Iceland, for the whole of Iceland, and to decrease seasonality. And the reason for that is that in the strategy since 2011, it has been Iceland all year round. What I thought was very, I was impressed with how they had measured the impact of every campaign that they have done. So you could actually see when they did the Ask Gudmundur campaign, where they had, I don't know if you know that campaign, but they had the Guðmundur all over Iceland, different Guðmundur people. They were named Guðmundur, and people could ask Guðmundur any question. So these people were kind of placed in different places around Iceland, and they were answering in videos, and they could actually monitor how that impacted where the tourists went after that campaign. So that was really, really brilliant. And what he told us was that the tourism had risen 40% after the Ask Guðmundur campaign, but that was the all-over growth in all of Iceland. Actually, in the East Fjords and in the West Fjords, that were the areas that were further away from Reykjavik, the growth had been even higher and even higher than 50%. So that is very, very impressive. What he also told us is that when they decided that Iceland is for it is the whole of Iceland and not only Reykjavik, they started to think about the different areas in different ways, and they did not market it as something exotic, but they marketed it as something accessible. And that was the key thing that was left from his presentation, that they are telling the stories about the areas as accessible, how easy it is to get there, rather than an exotic place. So that was it from me.
Thank you, Anle. And I guess seasonality is a challenge or a thing in all the region, at least here on the Faroes. And does anybody have a comment or something, an idea to share with us about seasonality? I mean, getting tourists to come to the Faroe Islands in the wintertime, is that a challenge? Would that be a challenge? Maybe you can promise the tourists that come to the Faroes and we promise rain every day. If not, you'll have your money back. We will go to the third workshop. Thank you, Anle. Local involvement. That workshop was up here. Tim, there you go. The sun is shining.
Thank you. Morning, everyone. Gosh, we covered a lot of ground yesterday in the local workshop. So I'll have to look at my notes because there were so many very good ideas that came out. We heard from Sweden, from Jerry, with his very interesting project, which sounded at first like it was a campsite business, but actually it turned out to be so much more. It was a business which attracted people to an outdoor style of living, and people who loved that style of life so much that they eventually ended up moving to the area. So the initial business idea ended up with not just involving the local community, but actually generating a new community, people who were invested in the positive values of the area that they'd first visited as holiday makers. And the message from all of the participants was very much based on the idea that it's about local life. It's not about going somewhere and taking something or an experience from it. It was about going and becoming part of a community, whether that was temporary or, in the Swedish case, longer term. From Finland, where we heard from Heidi about Adventure Apes, a company that specialized in locally focused outdoor activities. So far, so normal. But one of the identifying characteristics of their project is that they stressed the ability of people from any background to come and learn about the countryside, especially people with physical disabilities. And they went to a lot of trouble to find ways of making sure that people who had physical handicaps, even people who were blind, could go on very long outdoor hikes and participate in cooking and things that most of us probably take for granted. They also stressed that in these challenging times, they were very aware that many of the people who came and benefited from mixing with the local community in a small-scale way were people who were suffering from mental health issues. And then when we think about obstacles to participating in tourism, we should not forget that large sector of the community. We also learned from Heidi that there are more than 5 million saunas in the world, and that more than 3 million of them are in Finland. From Norway, we heard from Moa about the tiny island community of Træna, less than 500 people, but they had coined a very good slogan, which was again more than a slogan, which was Think Træna, which was essentially think big. They also like to think long term, and their tourism plan apparently encompasses 9,000 years of history and hopes to accommodate the changes that will come over the next 9,000 years. So if that isn't thinking big, I don't know what is. They also believed in Træna that by injecting new ideas into a very established and traditional community, that rural societies can survive without just becoming museums or places where people come and sort of gawp at the locals with their quaint ways. And they discovered that once they moved into the community with some quite outlandish ideas, which were initially resisted, that it did inject fresh life into the community, and older members of the community realized that, in fact, they could carry on living in this place, which they thought economically was not probably viable in the long term. From Faroe Islands, we heard from Jan Paula and Visit Faroe Islands about the concept of volunteerism as it's been realized here, and the value of making visitors contribute, not just in a physical way, but in making longer-term working friendships with Faroese community members. And that was an essential part of not just making the tourists feel good about coming here, but also making local people understand that at the end of the day, tourists are just people and actually have the same goals and values as people who live in this somewhat traditional society. I think that everyone at the workshop had one thing in common, and that was that making localism central to tourism projects requires patience. None of these things happened overnight. None of them happened quickly, and none of them happened without some local resistance. And we all heard from all of the projects that listening to the people who will be most affected by the increased numbers of visitors, whether we call them tourists, travelers, or volunteers, is what's really important. The participants also stressed that flexibility of attitude was essential. Communities at the local level are often willing to welcome outsiders, but this goes better if they are always asked what it is they would like to offer those visitors, and whether they can offer things which are dear to their heart. I think it was Heidi in Finland was asked at the end of the session whether an elderly lady who'd been shown helping visitors make foodstuffs out of locally collected berries, whether she was some sort of indentured laborer who was having to do this and humiliate herself by collecting berries and then earn small amounts of money by showing her recipes to visitors. And Heidi made the very good point that in this community of relatively older people, this lady actually couldn't wait for the day of the month to come round when she would be helping visitors make these dishes, and that she was potentially lonely and didn't necessarily have close family members nearby, and that this was a way of her participating socially in events which really brightened up her life. So it's important not to see local community members as victims of tourism necessarily. Jerry Engström from Sweden again pointed out that you need to create a system or a concept which lets people unfreeze their ideas and embrace change, and then the process eventually stabilizes. But without dialogue, nothing positive will ever happen. And in the general session yesterday, Zita Cobb from FOGO explained that dialogue is always two-way, and it means listening to local people. And again, I think she said it was a multi-year process. We heard in the keynote speech from Anna Pollock many of the things that resonated in the local tourism workshop, that perhaps the language of the industry needs to change, and that's particularly relevant when it comes to dealing with these small-scale projects in small-scale communities. It's no good talking about products and end results and talking about people and places as commodities. If we think about the Faroe Islands case again, the closed for maintenance project, I met so many of those people, and as Jan Paula explained, thousands of people signed up and are desperate to take part in that project because they feel less guilty about traveling if they feel that they're doing something physically useful, but also that they are working with Faroese people rather than just looking at the scenery and buying things. It's all about connecting with and meeting Faroese people. And that seems to be the lesson we learned at the workshop, that these small local scale projects have much more potential often than initiatives directed by people in government or in ministries who take a very top-down attitude to how tourism needs to develop. We learned from Visit Faroe Islands that tourism marketing is often more positive and more effective when it incorporates tourism planning. And these small-scale, on-the-ground businesses and projects are where the real mind shifts that Anna Pollock talked about so powerfully yesterday take place. So I think the message from the local workshops was generally very positive. The changes we want seem to be more likely to come about if we encompass this ground-up model. Again, as Anna said, if we think of the community as something like a biological system where we are all cells within the system, it's actually those tiny individual cells that eventually make long-term changes to the functioning of the overall organism. And these local tourism-focused projects are those small engines of growth that in the end create life, whether we think of that on the big cosmic scale or in the local community tourism sphere. So I think that was what we learned.
Thank you, Tim. Any comments or questions on local involvement? I think I'm going to give you a bonus. Since I know that mingling and networking is a great and important and nice part of a conference like this, we'll just go and have our coffee and fruit. And if it collides with the kitchen, I suggest that you use the first 15 minutes to go out and enjoy the good weather or just get some fresh air. And then coffee is ready at 10:30. So see you again at 10:50. To have the last point on the program, but not the least, just some practical info before we start. You see the sun is shining now. When I sent you out to get some fresh air, it was snowing, and now the sun is back. So this is the charm of the Faroes. One day, 4 seasons. Isn't it nice? And this morning, actually, in the radio, they had, for the first time this year, I think they had a warning of slippery roads. So the winter is approaching. For you, those of you who are going on the maintenance or voluntourism this afternoon, please bring sweaters and jackets and warm clothes. It's cold, actually, really cold outside. And also all the material from these 2 days, pictures taken and all the recording of the conference and all the slides, everything will be on visitfaroeislands.com/regenerative. You can find everything there. Next week. Thank you. Next week. Yeah, but they have to, just let it sink in and then read it again next week. So, and also the name tags. Please leave them just for reuse. So now on the program, Emil Spangenberg from Denmark in discussion with all the 3 keynotes. There you go. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah, so give a hand again for the 3 keynotes. It's Anna Pollack and Sina Jungersted and Sida Cobb. And first of all, I'm pleased to see so many of you survived the fire last night. That was that's nice. You scared us, didn't you? So this is a session that's wrapping up 2 days of really intense, I think, dialogue and ideas and conversations. It's rare that we have the opportunity to have the 3 keynotes the day after. And one of the things I find interesting in conferences is always thinking about what's been said, and then when I want to ask a question, they're gone. So I hope all of you have kind of interpreted and thought and perspectivized in your own heads what's been said from these 3 amazing speakers and thinkers, also from the different cases we listened to. And I have a few questions to kick off, and then we'll open it up for the floor, and we have pretty good time. And this is the last session of the day, so that's it. So let's kick it off. And I think, Sida, you just said that we should ask you your favorite moment of the conference. What's yours so far?
My favorite moment was watching Sina a few minutes ago on the lawn doing her Julie Andrews imitation in her perfect skirt. That was, I think it summed up.
Also kind of my favorite moment.
Okay, and actually I'd like to also hear from you, Anna. You've been, I've been lucky enough to sit next to you a few times, and you've been taking notes on your telephone and on your notepads. And what do you take home from this?
Oh, I'm going back personally regenerated, actually. I've been allowed out. I'm amongst a sea of beautiful people whose faces I can see, the smiles I can see, and just, realizing that so much of what we've been talking about is emerging all around us, and that is a great source of hope. So I'm going back filled with hope and joy, actually. It's been a pleasure.
And Sina, your personal takeaways?
Well, if it wasn't me jumping out on the hills, just the joy of actually seeing where we are.
Yeah.
And snow.
Yeah, and snow. But I think other than that, I actually thought I don't actually necessarily like dancing very much, but I enjoyed the dance yesterday. And I also enjoyed it because, and as someone was also reflecting this morning, I mean, I was looking around, we were very close, and people were singing and smiling, and I was like, 6 months ago, this would have been like a hard no. So there was just kind of a celebration also that we get to do that again.
Absolutely. And I think we'll take the lasting 72 verses this afternoon of the song. Yeah. So no, it was a very good experience. Absolutely. I would like to quote you guys a little bit, because we've heard some very amazing presentations from you, and you're all skilled presenters. I've noted down a few quotes that I'd like you to maybe give us some more perspective on. I've heard you say, Anna, that sustainability after 40 years is not working. That was in your talk. Sita, you had this amazing quote that I'm gonna have tattooed on my back, maybe. But it's tourism is a dance with the devil. Really dramatic. Also, you, Anna, said we're looking for problems in the wrong way, and one of your big points, Sina, was that the ever chase of authenticity in marketing or in destination development sometimes is fake. Pretty bad news if you look at it in this way, or pretty bad messages. There's a lot of bad news in here. What would be the first things, maybe kicking off with you, Anna, that you would give back to the room here? A lot of people that work practically with tourism and destination management and marketing and politics, what would be the advice to take home? Where do you start after messages like this?
Well, I think it came through loud and clear this morning. I was very excited to hear that Norway had realized, not just seen, but experienced themselves as a living system. And that this is changing the way that they have gone about the whole planning and approach. And that the key to success is the participation of every part of that system. And we can get caught up in the big picture. Yes, right now the big picture is pretty dire. But it's rather like, when a forest fire, and this is what the indigenous people will tell you, it has a hugely cleansing effect if it's not totally out of control. And it enables new shoots, or new shoots will come up very, very quickly after a fire has gone through an area. And what I'm seeing right now is new shoots, because we're now forced into, not forced, but we're encouraged, we're enabled. We have fantastic digital connectivity. So ideas are spreading around the planet at the speed of light. So I think what I see is an invitation, an opportunity for each of us now to realize that our participation matters. And if people take on that and realize that they can make a contribution, then change will happen. Change of the right kind of change will happen really fast.
And Sita, dancing with the devil sounds both interesting and dangerous at the same time. Will you elaborate a bit on the quote?
Yeah, it is interesting and it is very dangerous. I think that what we're all trying to figure out is what is the right frame for engagement, for coming together, for people from away coming to our locals. And we're coming off a time that, as you say, it didn't work. But this idea that anybody can go anywhere they want at any time and do anything they want is an idea that needs to be left in the past. And for each and every place in the world, we want to engage with visitors in a way that's dignified for visitors and local people. And that doesn't happen all by itself. It doesn't happen because some tour operator decides to put on a flight and bring in the whole bunch of people. And we got to make responsible frames for proper conversations, for proper engagement. And in making those frames, it has to be smaller scale. I just can't, we were just talking about the cruise ship industry, and I gather it's coming back in this huge demand. And at what point do we just say, as jurisdictions, no? And so I think I don't think it's good for Newfoundland if all of Toronto gets up on some morning and decides we're all going to go to Newfoundland. That's the thing about hospitality, right? The host, it's not hospitality if the host can't say no.
Yeah, exactly, and that was one of your
That's
big points of
beautiful.
understanding the perspectives.
Yeah, would you like us all to come to your house for supper tonight? No.
Not tonight. I have to call my wife.
You might not be ready. Yeah, exactly. She has to prepare. You have to prepare, not her.
Yeah. How many are we? Yeah. No, thanks. Sina, you work with a lot of destinations daily around Europe, especially, also in North America, Canada now. What would be your advice for people in the room here going back to their offices on not Thursday, but maybe Friday morning or Monday morning after messages and discussions like this? Where do you start?
Well, that's a very good question. Well, you start by asking questions, I think, which is also what we've seen in this conference. We are asking a lot of questions and then jointly trying to seek out the answers, because I think recognizing that there are some issues and there are some problems and they are growing, they're not going away, and some of them are coming back and others are accelerating. So I think asking questions, but then also starting to talk about what does it mean, because I think we're adding on a lot of things all the time, but I also think that we need to discuss then what don't we do anymore, and what are the things that we will stop doing, not just adding on additional agendas or priorities that we need to integrate with what we're already doing, but actually looking at, okay, well, if we're doing this, as Bente was also explaining, okay, well, if this is what we want, what does that then mean in terms of how we measure what we do, our activities, and so on. So I think that's an approach for saying, okay, well, if we mean this, if we mean regenerative, or we are aiming for regenerative tourism, what does it mean to us, all the activities we do? Yeah, I think one of the discussions that we've had a lot with destinations are this, a lot of them are talking about sustainability, quite a few have a sustainability strategy, but it's also very often parked with a sustainability manager in the corner. But you know, how is that integrated across all the activities, all the KPIs, all the objectives that you do? That's, I think, how we need to start talking about it.
And maybe even also the marketing.
Yes, it was definitely also the marketing. Yeah, it's an integral part of it.
Yeah. Yeah, because I think it's fair to say that we've seen a few destinations use sustainability as, well, somewhat of a gimmick more than an actual change, both in messaging and in marketing over the recent years.
Yeah, and I think that's also why it's interesting to read Norway's new strategy, because there are some very clear choices in there. There's also the discussion, which you know, about crews, that we're at some point it was almost like the dangerous topic to mention, and but also the discussion of, you know, can we go for long haul markets if we also look at our carbon footprints, and you know, how, so there are these questions in the strategy that I haven't seen a lot of other destinations sort of raise in the same open and transparent way.
So, Sida, a question to you. You coming from outside of kind of classic tourism, and one thing about the tourism industry, that it attracts people and it keeps them there for a long time. So a lot of people, I guess, in this room, especially people I've worked with, have worked in tourism for many years. You are the odd one, coming from corporate, coming from tech, coming from completely different backgrounds. What's your perspective on the structure of how tourism is organized today? Is it a part of the problem that it's organized in the way that it is?
I'm still trying to figure out how it's organized, but it seems, I've been at this a dozen years now, and I see it at home in Newfoundland and Labrador. It's definitely all very disjointed. You got people out saying, you know, visit with all these lovely ads, and those people seem to have no responsibility for actually what happens when people arrive, and you know, and where is that little girl with the red hair and the flowery dress, you know, and there's nowhere to eat and all of this. So really poor planning, absolutely, and which is why I keep coming back to, if the goal is to welcome people in a way that is dignified, then that means a more integrated planning by definition. And then the other thing that happens is, of course, you know, somebody gets up in the morning and says, "Oh, that's it. I'm going to start a big tour company, and I'm going to buy 20 buses, and I'm going to drive them all around the province." And someone can actually make that decision all by themselves. And then we're always correcting. I mean, I was super impressed with the plan from Innovation Norway. And I have to say, in the very early days, I learned more from visiting Norway with Innovation Norway in 2008, going up the coast to try and understand what they were doing. So thank you, Norway, for that. But looking at that plan this morning, like, it's mind-boggling how complete it is. I wouldn't want to be the person responsible for delivering on it, because but it's really a relief to see it all brought together like that. And I think that is the beginning of, now we have to, this unruly beast, somebody has to drive this bus. And I think there's no other way around except constant conversations. But you said, I think, Anna, the word tourism. It's like, what does that mean? I think if we should ground it in if it's not about hospitality, why don't we just call it hospitality?
To quote you again, you said another amazing thing. You said, I really believe in business is such a great way to organize.
Mm-hmm.
Can you elaborate about the perspectives of using business as a tool to develop? You've made some pretty good examples locally for yourself, but can you elaborate a little bit more on that? Because in a tourism sector, there's a lot of public money, there's a lot of incentive structures to do things, but you're coming with a business approach.
Yeah, I mean a business, because it's a frame, and I think that the best outcomes are when the frame is right. And so it's no different than we're coming to your house for supper. You set the frame as host. You set the table, you decide what you want us to eat, and then that's going to be a lovely evening. Otherwise, it's like a drive-by shooting. We all just came by your house and, pillaged the place. And that's too much of what's happened in the past. But it all starts with the ability and willingness to say no, and the foresight, which this Norwegian plan from this morning from Innovation Norway to set proper frames. I don't want to be picking on crews today, and maybe there are people here that I just don't understand how hundreds of people getting off a ship in someone's community is a frame for anything good.
Yeah, that's a good question and a good discussion. I've heard both sentiments, and I think coming from Copenhagen, where I've declared myself, I've worked with Sina in wonderful Copenhagen, where the cruise industry was a very big factor in developing the tourism industry as it is today. It's a turnaround destination. It takes, in a good year, it takes more than 1 million passengers on ships that fly in and have an overnight stay. So for the business, it's really, really important. But the discussion is there now to say, what kind of business is this?
And by having crews, what other better business has been displaced by its presence?
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
But
exactly.
Half the challenge is people are not asking the right questions. There's this assumption that more bodies means more benefit. And surely the cruise is an example. You've got 1 million people coming into the country, but where did the funds that they were, if they spent very much in the country, where were those funds going? Much of it was going right back to the cruise industry. And I just feel that we've not been questioning so many statements. That's why I really don't like the word sustainability. It has no meaning. If you go to the core meaning of the word, or it's lost its meaning, it is to maintain a state, right? So therefore the question has to be, what are we trying to sustain? It's implied that if you're sustainable, you're trying to sustain a natural environment, when in actual fact we're trying to sustain a system which is destroying that environment. And because we're not having these conversations enough, we perpetuate these myths, as it were. So more visitors is somehow a sign of success. More spending is a sign of success. More jobs are a sign of success, until you get to a situation right now where we can't recruit people and the jobs are crap. Sorry. So it's time we started to be really honest with ourselves. And I think when we are honest with ourselves, then we can be honest with everyone else, and then they will really want to engage more with us. Does that make sense?
It does make sense, but I think there's a lot of things a lot of these discussions and themes that are being parked in, responsibilities for the politicians, because there are some very big decisions here to be made. I think Norway was a great example of a strategy that binds it all together, and I think sets new goals for different topics at the same time, not just measuring for profit or what's easy measurable, because jobs and revenue is easy to measure. But the things about happiness and thriving communities is harder to measure in a KPI way. And so the metrics have changed for that strategy. But are we good enough at educating our politicians for these new challenges? Is the industry, all of us here, good enough in doing that, in your opinion? Maybe Signe first?
Well, I think there is definitely momentum now, because tourism has become part of a public discussion from the pandemic crisis. And so all of a sudden, at least in a lot of the destinations around Europe that I see, tourism is now a priority, or at least a prioritized topic to discuss. How do we rebuild? How do we, all these discussions that you've had in most destinations, in most countries and cities. So I think there is a momentum to buy into that, but there is also that idea which we've also discussed before, but you know, sometimes tourism also has to take that seat at the table and not necessarily always insist on tourism being the agenda, but then also saying, what is the agenda of this community, of this city, whatever, where do we want to go, and how can tourism be part of that? And I think we, as tourism professionals, also have to find that role, because there is a tendency for, at least from what I see in a lot of places, that tourism is only invited for tourism discussions, and as long as that happens, and as long as we take on that role, tourism will never become part of a bigger agenda, and I think that's important for the politicians to at least keep paying attention to these topics and issues and discussions.
And that, to me, is how we open up these conversations with the politicians. You know, they're ultimately held to account by whether people feel better off, in however they may define it, but at the end of it, they want to feel that they've made progress, or that they're happier, or they feel safer, or they feel their children have better prospects. All of these things essentially are encapsulated in what you might call the well-being of the overall community. And I think the biggest shift I see happening now, and the most necessary shift, as Senior has said, is to go into these conversations not saying, you know, we're going to grow tourism because, but asking questions about how can we contribute to the flourishing of this community and helping. Well, I mean, the other beautiful thing about the hospitality sector is we are hosts. One of the things that we really do well is we can we convene people in groups. And that's what's needed at the moment, is if we play that role as hosts that convene conversations about the things that matter, I think, again, we will be able to get an hearing. And we do have a real responsibility, in my opinion, to be educating the politicians. And let's face it, they're members of the community, they're human beings. Just because they become political doesn't mean to say that overnight they became a different animal. That happens if they stay in power too long. But they're still human beings. They've got families, and they've got thinking about their own future, etc. And I think the more we can just stop waiting for someone else to do it, the job, and take that on. Stop this notion that someone else is going to save us, and step forward, I think we'll make some progress.
And I'd like to go back to your case, Sita, and I think your story, because it's so inspiring for all of us. But it's also a story of, I think, a passionate person coming back and both, I think, having the vision and the understanding and the legacy and the history of this place to change it, and it works. In that's factors that work in changes. Do we need more passionate people that's willing to go that extra mile, or should we rest on the organizations as they are to do the work?
I mean, I've never, this idea that there's a tourism industry or sector just seems false. Like it's a part of maybe what we should think of ourselves maybe as conductors or choreographers, to build a kind of connective tissue. And you know, it's funny, I was thinking about the Norwegian presentation again this morning, because it was so, I thought, my God, if we were Norway, because in Canada we think Norwegians have more money than God. It would be like, well,
they do.
And they do. Yeah.
Why would Norway want visitors at all? Okay.
That's a good question.
No, but I've only been thinking about it for 5 minutes, but I think Norway does need visitors, because I think it's in relationship with the other that we kind of understand who we are, and we develop, and we deepen our cultures, and yeah, I think it's just a part of how we belong to the world. And I think this whole tourism question is about how do we belong to the world, and our curiosity about what's over there, and what's the proper way to go over there. So yes, if I was Norway and deciding I would absolutely want to have a visitor economy, as you are, being super careful about how to do it. So to come back to Fogo Island, we kind of started with that line from the book The Leopard. You know, this, we were talking about this last night. This is a book written in 1958, set in Sicily at a time that all of the prevailing institutions had outlived their usefulness, which you might argue about much of the tourism industry, come to think of it. And so the great line the man says is, if you want things to stay the same, things have to change. And so on Fogo Island, what do we want to stay the same? We want to have a continuity of life and culture and experience in this place. We want to live next to the graves of the people that came before us, and so we understand that we need to have an economy that underpins our ability to stay here, but an economy that actually helps us understand who we are and deepens culture, and that we belong to the world in a way that has our agency in it. And so when you think about that, it takes you very quickly to hospitality and how we receive visitors, and that kind of strengthens who we are. We learn from it. Like, it's about human exchange. When it's, I keep coming back to this, when it's done in the right frame and the right scale. Otherwise, someone is by definition diminished, or it's undignified for visitors, and people are reaching into their pocket for $20 to say, oh, you know, I just spent an afternoon with this lovely person, and is $20 enough? You know, like this kind of the money changing in the temples of people's communities is wrong. But I think if we do business properly, like we have in the way we've done the inn, there's absolutely no tipping at all. Money is changed in the proper frame at the right time so that we are free to spend time together without this constant transactional presence.
It becomes a human encounter, not a transaction.
Exactly.
And the magic of that encounter is where the real value lies, and it's not just material. I mean, it's emotional, it's spiritual, it's physical, and we've completely underplayed all those aspects of it by commodifying it to nothing more than an encounter.
Here's the deepest question of all when we were starting this at home. The same woman who said, we're only 2,500 people, we can only love so many people at a time, she said, but if we sell it, is it still hospitality? I don't have an answer. Like, that is like the haunting question, right?
Well, I think it goes back to this notion of how you're talking about business. In nature, we have metabolism. That's every cell has a metabolic system of taking in energy, converting it into something, and that's where I see the role of business. But as you've done in Fogo Island, you've basically said, yes, we have to pay for the construction, we have to give people a living. So there's money involved, but you can do that in a way that doesn't demean the encounter. It doesn't make anyone feel that they're being exploited. Or they're any less of importance in that encounter because of two equals. And it's that giving and taking, back and forth, the reciprocity, the interdependence, that is what we need to be really focusing on. I think this notion that when you look, where is the value in the visitor economy, it all comes down to that meaningful encounter between two people. And if we can choreograph that, as you say, in a way that gives real meaning to both parties, then we will be successful by nature.
Sina, thinking about your experience and also the situation that we're in right now, a lot of destinations, we've just seen one of them beautifully presented, come out with strategies towards 2030 or 2035 or 10-year visions, you know, the big ones. Easy on paper, really hard to do in life. But I think the question here is, are the ideas bold and big enough to actually make that change that we're talking about?
I was excited at several points throughout the pandemic because I found that we were sort of discussing the big ideas, and there were lots of conversations had. I also showed a couple of examples yesterday, but there were so many of like, what kind of city do we want to come back to? Or now in the absence of tourism, what do we like? How are we imagining this future? You had almost like any big city had like imagine Melbourne or imagine London or imagine somewhere else. So I think we've had a lot of those conversations, but I for now it's now implementing the ideas and moving forward on that. And I think I see some of them, especially sort of in urban planning, the stuff's happening, and we're taking out parking lots. And but I haven't seen any like really big ideas in tourism happening. But I think there's a lot of we're on our way. And I think there's also, what I would actually say, I know we talked about we need the bigger ideas, and I agree with that, but I also think we are living, everyone's talking about new normal or next normal or what is it, and I think we have to accept to a certain extent that new normal is just chaos. And that doesn't have to be a bad thing. It's in many ways the world that we're living in, VUCA times, and lots of changes all the time, and so maybe it's also experimentation, which is another thing that excited me throughout the pandemic, that there was a little bit shorter, there was more room for that somehow. We weren't as afraid to experiment with new things, try out different solutions. So maybe that's the way forward. So we can have a big vision on where we want to go, but maybe not have all the solutions and all the answers ready on the way. So yeah, I would say, I don't have that one like, yeah, some place they're thinking it really huge. And I'm not sure I'm not sure that's the way to go either, but I think we have to be brave enough to try different things. What you do see is you see places like Machu Picchu or lots of different places where there's sort of Venice is starting to charge people to enter the old city, and so you see destinations sort of starting to limit the number of visitors they want to accept or to welcome on a daily basis, for example, in Machu Picchu. And I think that's also an important question, and it kind of taps into some of the things that we've been discussing here, is, the idea of whether or not you have the right to go somewhere, which is a question that I think we ask a lot. And I go, so is it okay that not everyone can go to Machu Picchu whenever they please? And I would hope that coming out of the pandemic, we also understand the privilege of that, and that will travel be more expensive? Will it now only be for a very limited part of the population? It already is. It already is a very limited part of the population that travels somewhere across the globe for fun. So it is a privilege, and it has been all along. And I think that idea, we need to integrate that in the way that we develop tourism moving forward, that it is a privilege, and both as travelers and as hosts, we have the right to celebrate that privilege and celebrate that special moment that it is that you are invited, you get to be here, and I get to meet you, and the exchange in that meeting. So I don't necessarily think we have to think big. I think we have to think quite small, actually.
And actually, one thing we have not talked about, maybe we have to stay another day now if I'm going to bring this up, because we haven't talked about one of the things we're all trying to reconcile is what is the relationship between our physical lives, and this is the thing about hospitality, it is physical embodied experience, and our virtual lives. And I think perhaps one of the reasons this tourism has become so distorted is the digital world ran away ahead of it, and we can't physically keep up with all that this industry pumps out. I think it would be a great thing if we just all agreed right here, no one's making any more videos. Let's just stop with the videos.
Yeah, I have to change my business model then.
No, but I think, and this, I was at a gathering in Canada the other day, and they were talking about, the future of travel is frictionless travel. And I thought, this sounds really bad. Frictionless travel.
What did they mean?
Well, what they meant was someone should be able to go online and buy supper at your home without you even knowing, I think. And somehow when they arrive, it's all going to be the table set, and it's all. I think this kind of goes in. We are in conflict with our embodied selves half the time, and we are so in love with this virtual. It's all going to be frictionless. But ultimately, it's going to come down to some cranky guy on the side of the road who says, too many people going up my drive. We forget that part. And so I think we need to moderate the presence of the digital tools in our physical world, and especially in this way. Like, one of the things we decided very early on, we have a website for the Folk Island Inn. I actually like to take it down, but you can't make an online booking because we decided that's like a drive-by shooting. Like, at the very least, you have to talk to us before you come.
So it sounds like the technology that's also opened up the world and made it smaller in many ways and made so much possible for each any one of us has been part of the big problem of
acceleration beyond
the acceleration
what's natural.
And the distortion that we're experiencing
Yes.
in destinations.
I think.
Yeah.
But I'm a Luddite. Everybody could tell you that.
Yeah, but I think I agree 100%, and I spent an awful lot of my career working in technology. But I'm not a bit, and I'm not a byte. I'm a human being. And ultimately, when hospitality is done really well, it's because, as I said before, two real human beings with a physical presence, with a heart, a spirit, a soul, actually do find ways of connecting non-digitally. And it's the quality of that experience that matters, and it's the quality of the journey to get there. God forbid that it's totally... You might as well just do Star Trek stuff. Beam me up, Scotty, you know, as if I could be beamed into Fogo Island Inn. Well, where's the joy in that? And maybe I also sound, maybe it's my age, I sound like a Luddite too.
But are we in a bubble of time right now? I mean, coming from Denmark this week, this is the fall vacation this week. So schools are closed, and this is like the break you take before we head into Christmas. So everyone's off. And my feeds are filled with friends and colleagues and peers everywhere else but Denmark. This has been the biggest selling travel week in Denmark for many years. And I know there's a lot of built-up demand to go out after so many months of lockdown and not traveling. But are we in a bubble where all of us here, privileged, educated, understand the problem, talk about this, but we have a world outside that just wants to travel, that just wants to go out and have fun and spend money and don't really care? Is that a situation?
It could well be, but a lot of adolescents want to do things that aren't ultimately good for them either. So.
Yeah, back to your question about politicians. Maybe it's different on this side of the ocean, but do they actually lead or just follow? And so I think it's the general citizenry that needs to... I think we need to have a broader conversation about what it means to travel and what it means to the place you're going. And as you say, just because I thought it and I want to do it doesn't make it something that should happen.
No, it's not a human right.
It's not a divine right.
So I'd love to get some questions from the room in just a minute. So if you have something, please think about it, and we'll have one more question up here. But and anything is okay. This is an open fireside chat without a fire. We had that yesterday. The last question, I think, and maybe changing the theme a little bit, but also looking at the room, looking at the values of the Nordic countries. I would like to have a discussion about diversity in our industry and diversity in our strategy work and what we're talking about. Sina, you showed some really interesting examples of destinations, cities, urban areas using diversity as more than just something that we have to do, but something that they've put into the center of strategy and products.
Yeah.
What's your thoughts about how we work as a business and how this group of people looks, basically?
Well, we had the discussion before, and as we were talking about and looking around in this room, I mean, we look very much alike, a lot of us, and I think, you know, in a sense that is a part of the discussion we need to have, and not just in the Nordics, but in Europe. We also program European cities marketing conferences, and you know. We're always trying and get a program of multiple different speakers, and also to represent different kinds of businesses and destinations. And it's very difficult because the tourism industry does look very much alike across most of Europe. But I think it's an important discussion to have, and they've had it quite a lot in the US, also following some of the tragic happenings there. But I don't think we've really understood the discussion on our in our part of the world yet and haven't really integrated. It's both in terms of how we market our destinations, how we represent the communities that we are promoting to others to visit, but it's also in our organizations, like in the partnerships that we do, in the how we spend our promotional powers. Who do we invite to see when we have media visits as destinations? Who do we take them to see? What businesses do we expose them to? And all these things. So I think there are multiple layers in how we have to start talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion in our way of working. Also now I'm talking specifically from a destination perspective, but I think across multiple perspectives. But I just wanted to add one thing also to the technology part, because I think it taps a little bit into this, maybe not that much. But I don't want to blame technology. Again, I think it's the way that we use it.
Absolutely, it's a tool.
So it's again, I think it drives back to human behavior and being reflective of what we do and how we do it. I showed you the campaign from Jackson Hole, Tag Responsibly. It's a very simple campaign, but it's not necessarily the technology that you can tag a place, it's that you do it as a human being. And I think, we just have to be reflective of what we do and how we use the tools available, and that also means the power that you have as a destination, for example, or as a business working in tourism, how you use that power, how you use that representation. Sure. And we saw some great examples yesterday, I think, in some of the workshops as well.
Absolutely. And Anna, you have some...
Yeah, I'm probably going to sound more like a philosopher than a tourism person. In fact, I don't call myself a tourism expert anymore. But I'd like us to go back to the sort of root of what hospitality is about. And hospitality is about welcoming a stranger into your home on the assumption that we're all depend on one another. And I find it ironic that right now, and I would suspect over the next few decades, we're going to see mammoth amounts of migration going on. And on the one hand, here we are saying we're in the hospitality business, but there are only a few examples that I'm aware of, I know there are some, where the hospitality sector has taken a very proactive stance to contributing to how we welcome migrants. So how can you hold these two things separately from one another? And what is a stranger? And I would argue, looking, Nordics have a fairly uniform ethnic population relatively to a place like England at the moment, or parts of the USA. But strangers can also be people that are of a different economic class or have just had a bad experience in life, and maybe they're even, homeless down there, or it's a child that's not been able to get out and see what's around them. How are we as as a community of hospitality people able to see strangers differently and accommodate them differently? I know I don't have an instant answer for this, but we are relying on a very privileged section of the market. You said, the number of people who actually fly is really, who can afford to fly, is really rather small. So we're creaming off the top, or we've got the low-hanging fruit, or whatever wretched metaphor or cliche you want to use. I think the more that we open up our hearts in that sense, we're going to be able to make those big shifts.
But I also think that, and I like the philosophical part, but I think there is a very concrete part in how we work and discuss tourism in this room and in when you go back to your desks and work more. Because one thing that, throughout the pandemic, where lots of destinations have had this discussion around, either they call it quality tourism, or as I showed you yesterday in Amsterdam, it's valuable or value-adding tourism. And there's always, and it's always sort of versus mass tourism, or sort of versus the tourism we don't want. And if you ask anyone, sort of, okay, close your eyes and then tell me, what does the tourist, the visitor that you want to have, how does he or she or they look like? and it's always kind of a person that looks like yourself, you know, because it's never it's an Asian visitor, because we use that, we have these very prejudiced idea of what is the tourism we don't want, and it's you know, it's very biased against, for example, an Asian market, which is typically used as sort of our symbol of what does mass tourism look like. And I think as working within the business, we actually have a responsibility to nuance that much more than we do today. And so in Copenhagen, for example, there's lots of stories, not right now, about over-tourism in the media, and very often they are sort of illustrated with stock images of Asian tourists. And if you ask, there's a study coming out from the US, if you ask, for example, Asian travelers, they also take offense at always being promoted shopping. And all the messages that the destination target them with are shopping opportunities. And they're like, I'm actually a person interested in a lot of different things, and it doesn't relate to my race necessarily. And so I think, you know, that I just want to say that I do think that there are some quite concrete things that we can also do as a whether we call ourselves an industry or whatever, I'll say the people in this room, to make the stranger more welcome. And it's not enough to just say that we do it. It's also how do we represent different visitors. And oh, okay, I'm cut off now. No, stop talking. Anyway, you got my point.
Yeah, absolutely. And just a little true personal anecdote from the first time I was here filming in the island of Kalsoy. That's an island, right? Yeah. A fantastic little place. You literally feel like you're at the end of the world when you're out there by the lighthouse in Kalsoy, and you have to drive, and you have to sail, and you have to hike out there. And we were out there, the four of us, filming. We heard the sound of a drone, and we turned around, and there was this young couple from Seoul, South Korea, and they traveled all the way from Seoul, just the two of them, with their 1-year-old baby, hiked to go there. So I think the idea of this classic Asian just masters is wrong. Of course, they find and travel and navigate as the rest of us do through personal interests and things they want. And they've done that just to go here for a week. And it was a fantastic little encounter at the end of the world, it felt like. Anyway, let's open it up to the room. Any questions, any comments? It doesn't have to be a question. We're opening up for perspectives or comments from anyone? Anything you disagree or you want to have elaborated even more? No? No? Please come out if you have anything. So I'm going to bring it back to you guys, and then if there's anything, please add on, and then we'll wrap it up in a few minutes. So if I'm to sum up a little bit here, and you can agree or disagree, but for some of you, we're talking about tourism as a system, and we're keeping the focus on trying to make that system better. But as I understand a lot of your perspectives is that's part of the problem, is to keep it within the system. We have to open it up and look at it and understand it and plan it in a more broad sense with more stakeholders and different perspectives. That's one of them. And the second is that we have a responsibility to not just overflow our abilities to use technology and the way that everything's connected just to get more, but actually also to have the discussion of how we want to use it in a personal and responsible way. Any finishing comments from the panel here on I think the perspectives of what we've discussed over the past 2 days? Anything that comes to mind that you want to end off with? Anna?
I guess really repeating myself. Nature doesn't have 5-year plans. Nature has all of its diverse aspects, components, systems, call them what you will, and it's in that connecting, in that coming together, that new ideas emerge. And I think we're very much still in that old mindset that we have to plan everything, as opposed to allow things, new ideas, new ways of being on the planet to emerge just through our connectivity. So I'm finding that, and even in my own life now, and this is the philosophical bit, You know, you spend a lot of your time planning your career, and I should do this, and I should have these goals, and all the rest of it. And now I'm much more content to just be myself and see what the universe provides. Now, as I say, I'm getting a little too philosophical for many of you. But again, how do we know what really is going to happen next week? We have no idea. Nobody foresaw the pandemic. There were experts in some corner somewhere doing it. So it's really, how do we first of all create much better connections among ourselves? If all those Danes right now in Copenhagen are rushing out of the country, you know, you're going to have some pretty empty streets, and it will be left to the people that can't afford to leave the country. So how about how we really start to focus again on getting to know each other as human beings and forming communities? The word community is bandied around. I know I'm sounding like a bit of a rant now. But we're just using these words without thinking, what does it mean? It means to come together with a unified sense of purpose and belonging and caring and interdependence. If we start focusing on that as hosts in our places, that they become true communities, I think is the direction I would like to see us go.
Sita, any closing remarks?
I want to second that, Anna, absolutely. I think, and I think it has to start with everything is about place. And when we think about travel, we have to ask why. And somehow I think it's gone too far toward distraction and entertainment, and less about the actual why that I think we all feel, which is we're meaning-making creatures, as I said yesterday. So we want to understand, what do the people over there understand that I don't understand? Because we're all trying to make sense of life. And so I think rooting or rerouting travel in cultural exchange, and I think we've just begun to scratch the surface generally around how we engage with visitors around culture and art as proper frames. I mean, yes, there are museums and institutions, but those are just the beginning of conversations. So I think that going back to the why, the learning, the change, the shift in perspective, and away from, you know, we're just all going to go to Barcelona and get drunk this weekend.
Sounds great.
See you there.
Signe, any closing remarks?
Yeah, I think there was actually a question.
Oh, sorry.
That was a way of distracting from my...
Great.
Off the hook, Signe.
There you go.
Sita, thank you for this rerouting tourism to cultural exchange part. Do you have any ideas? Does anyone on the stage actually have any ideas how to actually start teaching the masses the power of cultural exchange, because they go to see a place and take a picture? How do you share this knowledge with all these people who are taking tourism in a different way today?
Big question.
Well, I think it starts with the places that people want to go to. And actually Barcelona maybe is a good example, because they have asserted community. They have asserted agency, or started to, from what I understand. And I think the duty is not on an industry sector, because I still don't know what this sector means. Like, we're like this weird intermediary industry, but I think it's about the places. And each place, to be responsible to its citizens, needs to create the frames, create the kind of rules, set the table for how people arrive. And I mean, and I think we appreciate that. When I go to your house, like, I'm looking for the signals from you. Like, is this a house where you take your shoes off or not? Or is this a house they leave their shoes on? So I think we just haven't, as places, and I think it's back to you what you said, we need to assert more community in the world and assert place, and the leadership and the signals need to be set by the hosts. And we can do that. That is our divine right.
Now you just need to go around all the tourism boards in the world and share this idea. You know,
they're watching online, so yeah.
All of them, they need to hear it. Yeah, thank you.
Any other questions from the room? Tim is there. Just Tim in the back.
Hi, I think the people on the stage know me by now, but Tim Eckert. Just to pick up on the point there, I think no one here disagrees with the idea that it's about community and it's about people. But there is, one of the many elephants in the room is the airline industry. Zita, you talk about sector. Well, let's talk about the sector of airlines. Barcelona, lots of former Eastern Europe. The reason those countries and those destinations have a problem is that low-cost airlines arrived within the business model and started selling a weekend in Barcelona for 10 euros. There was no problem with the community in Barcelona. There was probably no problem with the people who went there to look at the Gaudi buildings originally. But as soon as you democratize that key sector, which is how people get from A to B, you create a massive problem. The lady over there talked about the masses. It is the masses. A friend of mine said to me recently, we just drove up to Scotland for the first time since the pandemic, and we had to stop at the motorway service station. And it was really scary. You should have seen the people there. And I said, but that's because you live in a nice little village in the south of England. Those people are what the country looks like. And those are the people who pay $9.99 to get on a plane to Barcelona. I'm just wondering what your thought is about how you merge this conceptual analysis and problem solving about making this local, making this community, with the sheer numbers of people who can now travel anywhere with direct, cheap flights. Unless that changes, and it won't change from the airline sector, it will only change if somebody in government says no more.
Well, the idea that there is a cheap flight is a wrong idea anyway. The externalities created by a 99 euro flight are immense, just thinking about carbon alone. 12 euro, oh, I can't, it's okay, okay, we fly around for free. And so that clearly, now, I think there are two things there. Remember the 3 pillars from Rajan's book, which I want to go back, that's called the third pillar. It's worth reading. Societies rest on 3 pillars: governments, markets, and communities. And all 3 of them need to function, and they need to collaborate. And so there is absolutely a role for government in regulating what airlines are doing. Here we are talking about how on earth we're going to control the carbon. So clearly this needs to be changed. And I keep coming back to my point. We don't have a divine right to travel. And so I think government's under-functioning in the scenario you're describing. But I also think destinations are under-functioning, because destinations, Barcelona or any other place, have not just a right, but a duty to say, okay, enough. This is as many flights as we want in. And because that's all, it's about getting the scale right. And how many people are on the planet now doesn't mean that each and every person has a right to go wherever they want, whenever they want, at the price that they set. And just because there is a rogue player, which I would consider someone charging 12 euros to get on a plane, that's a rogue player that needs to be reined in.
Sorry, they're not a rogue. That is the industry model, that you can fill a seat.
But I understand that.
From the point of view of the system, it is a part of that system that is being able to exploit, a situation for their own direct benefit. There aren't that many low-cost airlines, but it was also, we all participate in that, because the governments, as I said earlier on, were happy to allow those flights to be made available because they got the numbers. Some DMO somewhere was really happy because all of a sudden they got all these people flying in. This was long before we understood that the externalities were not being paid for. Now we know we've got to change that. And there shouldn't be a mechanism where an airline can charge, as you say, 12 euros to fly from London to go and get drunk in Ibiza. But for me in Herefordshire, which is, a 3-hour journey, it's going to cost £75. There was something really fundamentally wrong, as you say, broken about the system, that we allowed certain individual. You can't just blame the carrier. It was just an entrepreneur exploiting an opportunity. But it was the entrepreneur was just thinking about their own.
I
gain.
do blame the carrier because there are people too that can make different decisions.
I didn't say that very well because obviously the carrier was exploiting the opportunity in that sense. They were rogue, but we as a community were not saying that this doesn't make sense. And it was only, and for example, even in Barcelona, they were probably very happy to have those numbers back in the early 1990s, late 90s. We were coming out of a recession. It was let's have more, let's have more, let's have more. And still, if you go around most DMOs right now and look at their strategies, it's still let's have more. Now we can use the recovery as a kind of way of pretending that we're just trying to get back to normal or get back to the level. But it's still the mentality that we have to get people moving and moving to us.
Well, I think that's probably also one of the big paradoxes right now is that we're coming out of a pandemic and we're talking about recovery, and we have a lot of the market players are just urging beds to fill up, seats to fill up. I know, Tim, from Ryanair, that's going to be the cheapest tickets from now on until the next 6 months ever, just to get things bouncing back.
But
so we'll see them cheaper than ever before in the next 6 months all around Europe to get people back into flying.
Well, I'm sorry, I'm just going to be contradictory. You earlier on said there's the enormous pent-up demand right now to get out. So why do we have to make it cheap to get out? When so many people want to get out, and we now know the true cost of that flight, that this is an opportunity to say, yes, exercise, release that pent-up demand, but it's not going to cost you £12 to go away for the weekend anymore. It's going to cost you what it really actually costs us as a community. And if we don't make those changes now, when people are aware just how vulnerable we are, how the pandemic has been caused by just assuming we can do these things, we can cut down trees and have things cheaply. Now is the time you talk about educating the population. Now is the time to use this opportunity, it seems to me, anyway.
This discount airline thing, we don't have this in Canada that I know of, anyway. But I understand it's a big thing in Europe. But I really need to understand, what is the business model? And Tim, maybe is the business model that they don't need to make money on selling the seat because they're getting the returns back in their share price? Is that so? It's actually functions in the capital market. Is that how it works?
Yes.
Okay, well, that's a very dangerous thing because money is an unlimited resource. And so really what we're always up against is the return to capital, because we're investing in Ryanair stock, is high. And as we are all seeing, we are in the midst of a social revolution because the returns to labor, and I know it sounds very left, return to labor has been insufficient in the business model of all the operators in the tourism economy. I struggle with that word.
And Tim, just follow up.
If I could just follow up with that. It's not fair to call Ryanair or EasyJet a rogue operator because they're all low-cost airlines now in Europe because the mainstream former national carriers have joined that price war. So British Airways does the same thing. The cheapest ticket, you don't get hand luggage, or you have to keep your hand luggage under the seat. It's the same model with American Airlines in the USA. The market has changed. The sector has responded to this seemingly endless demand for cheap air travel. And all I'm saying is, we can label them rogue, we can lament it, but until the government says no, it will not change.
No, I completely understand that is a part of this industry that we're all implicated in, that we can talk about sustainability and all of this until the cows all come home. But if airplanes are taking off with 12 € seats and all of that, that's just not looking at the opportunities and the problems in a holistic way. And that no sector can operate independently. But when I say rogue, you could do the right thing without being regulated to do so.
And but we do
you?
actually have to wrap things up.
That's a good one. Why would you? Are we good or are we fundamentally evil? We're good, Tim. We're not fundamentally evil, yes.
But time is ticking and everyone has places to go. There's lunch pretty soon. So this is actually the last thing. I think the final words will be from Guri today. But give them a round of applause again for their wise words and perspective. Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much, you four. And it was a very interesting discussion and a very thorough and good sum up of the 2 days. Thank you. Before I leave the mic and the floor to Guri Højgaard, I will just thank you all for participating and wish you all a pleasant and safe journey home, wherever home is. There you go, Guri.
Thank you so much. After almost 2 days of presentations, discussions and networking, it's already time to say thank you. And I'm really hoping that you all have got as much inspiration out of this as I have. Actually, I must say that I'm pretty glad that we decided to record the conference, because there are so many grains of gold in all the phrases and all the viewpoints that we have heard these 2 days. The only thing left to say is thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you to all the presenters. Thank you for coming here. Some of you have been traveling for days, coming to visit us and inspire us here in the Faroe Islands. Thank you to all who have been part of planning and coordinating the event. And thank you for coming and attending the conference together with us. I really hope that you will go home with new thoughts on this journey to try to, or with our aim to improve the tourism for the future. Thank you.